Hi there, and welcome to Watching Me Code. I'm going to create that quiz that we talked about um, in the OOP lecture, the writing classes lecture. So first, I'm going to start off with this idea of a true-false question. The minimum data needed to create one is the text of the question itself and what the correct answer should be. And then I need a couple of methods, one to tell me whether or not it's correct, the response was correct, and I need to be able to set the response once, somebody types it in. So what does that look like? I can go ahead and create a class here, class true, false question, just like that, and then colon, because the colon means that there's going to be indented stuff after it, and that indented stuff is going to be owned by this class. The minimum data needed is the stuff that's needed by the initializer. And the initializer in Python is a function, a method called init, right there, init. And it puts in a whole bunch of crap here, so I'm just going to delete this stuff. And it takes self. Remember, self is something that Python gives to us, so we don't have to do anything with self. But we also need the text of the question and the correct answer. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in there. I'm going to do text and answer like that. So now that I have those parameters, I can shove that data that's being passed in into the object by using self. So self dot, and they say use 2 underscores like that, self dot underscore underscore text, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use 1 because I don't like the double underscore thing. So you can do whatever you'd like. And so here I'm also going to do answer. I would recommend putting an underscore on these though, at least 1. More, but not more than 2. So 1 or 2. That's pretty much your choice. So that takes care of the minimum data needed. Now, when I create a true/false question, I have to give it text and I have to give it an answer. Down here in my main, I'll show you how that happens. So I'm going to do question is equal to true/false question, just like that. And let's say I don't give it anything. Let's say I don't give it any parameters or any arguments whatsoever here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And we'll see over here that I get a nice error. And this error says, let's take a look at it. It says, true false question init missing 2 required positional arguments, text and answer. So you see, I have to provide text and answer to this right here, to this on line 16. That's where this is happening. Line 16 in main. If I click on it, if I click on it, how do I click on this? There used to be a way to, oh, there it is. So I click on it and it takes me here to this line. So it requires 2 positional arguments, text and answer. So I'm going to go ahead and give that. So like the sky is neon green is the text and the answer is going to be false. Okay. So now I've got those 2 things set up like that. See? So if I run this now, boop, now it just runs. There's nothing happens. Nothing happens because I'm not doing anything with it. So if I make that go away and I run it again, it just says boop, right? All I've done is create an object, put it into a variable. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and put a little breakpoint here, and I'm going to go ahead and run this with my Python debugger. And that's going to kick off, and I'm going to move this over here so that I don't see that. Okay, so here we are with question, true, false question, okay? Right now, I've got no local variables. I've got some global, but I don't care about that. Whoops, I said the S word. So right now, I'm on this line right here. I'm going to step into this function, and just like with other functions, what it's going to do is it's going to take the line of control here from here to the first line of the function, of the initializer. And it's the initializer because I'm initializing a new object of this class right here. So it's going to go up there to that init function. So on the next step here, when I step into it, here I am up here. So now let's take a look at the variables that are here. I've got answer is equal to false. So that's this right here. That answer right there is false. And the text right here is the sky is neon green. And you can see those are the values that I passed in here. So the second argument here becomes this third parameter here. Self is provided by Python, so we kind of ignore it when we're passing in arguments. And the sky is neon green becomes the text here. And so you can see that's the text and that's the answer inside these variables right now. If I open up self, you can see that there's some special variables. And if I look inside there, there's a whole bunch of crap. I don't want to look at that yet, or ever, maybe, because, all of the special variables, you can see they're all underscore things. That's stuff that's like Python. So I'm just going to ignore that for right now. I'm going to go ahead and step over that line there. And now you can see inside self, there is now a variable on self. You can see right here, this underscore text is part of self. It's a variable for self. And this is right here, self.text. That's what ran, and it gave it that value. The sky is neon green. So I've taken the data that came in here through a parameter, and I've assigned it into this object, this self object. So now it lives here as self._text. And any other method inside my class can see self_text. And that's the important thing. That's how we share data inside an object. So if I step over this one, it just went away because we're back down here, but we can look at this return value right here. Can we see that return value? Oh, the return value is none. Hold on, let me step over it. Oh, and we're just popping along. Let me do something else here. I'm gonna put in one more line here so that it doesn't end up going away. Print question like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my breakpoint here, and I'll run it with the Python debugger. And again, I'll move this over so we can see what's going on. So right now we have this, we went and we already initialized this. So this initializer has run, and now there's an object living inside question. And what kind of thing is inside there? Let's move this over here. You can see that it is a true false question object. It's a special kind of object. It's an object of a class that I made. This is my own custom data type. And inside question, I've got two pieces of data. The dot answer that I passed in, and the dot text, the underscore text and the underscore answer. You can see those. They're on this question object now. Question object right here. If I were to go here to watch, and I were to do something like, question dot underscore text, that's the value that is stored inside that object now. That question object, this special object right here, which is a true false question type, has a variable on it, underscore text, that stores the information that I passed in there. Okay. And the same would be for underscore answer. So I would be able to see that underscore answer would be false right there. And so that's what's happening after I call this initialization. I've created an object that has data on it. The answer is false. The text is the sky is neon green. I've shoved that inside there. So let's go on to the next thing that I've got to do. Let me see. Let's go ahead and kill this session. So I've got this minimum data needed. That's already taken care of. That's going to be stored inside the object. Now let's call set a response. So let's just do that. So another method here, set response like that. And the first argument is self, because this is a method on that object. So I need to be able to get, a reference to that object. I need to know what the self is of that object. And then here's the response from the person, okay? And so maybe I'll do some nice stuff. I'll do self.response is equal to response. Maybe I'll do strip so that it strips away all of the extra characters on the left and right. That's okay. I can totally do that, And maybe I want to turn this into a Boolean or something. So I need to convert whether or not the word is true or false into a response here. But that's a whole bunch of stuff. So I could do that. So for example, I could do something like this. So response is equal to response.strip, and then I'm also going to make it lowercase. I'll make it lowercase so that I can just easily compare it. So if response is if I could spell it correctly, if response is equal to true, like that, because I made it lowercase, then I'm going to set self-response equal to true. Otherwise, I'll set self.response equal to false. And again, I'm not spelling it very well here. Equals to false, like that. So here, now I'm converting these into Booleans because I want these to be Booleans here. So when somebody types in the word false, it will be the Boolean false. And if they type in the word true, it will be the Boolean true. So that when I do a comparison to the value that's actually passed in, false, I'll get the correct thing. So now I can not only print question, I could do something like print question. I could do like print question.text like that. I can do print question.answer like that. And I could do print question._response too. So I could print all of these things out just to see what's going on. So let's take a look and see what happens here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint here, and I'll go ahead and run this with my Python debugger. So I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to move this over here, and we're just going to walk through this and see what happens when I go to the next line. So now I've got a question object. I'm going to print out question.text. The sky is neon green. I'm going to print out the answer. The answer is false. And now I'm going to print out the response. Oh, and now I get an error. I get an error, what's called an attribute error here. And why do I get an attribute error? That's because self.response hasn't been set yet. Look over here on this question. There's got an answer and a text. There's no response. There's no response attribute on this. I've only set text and answer so far. To get response set on here, I actually have to call set response first. So let me do that. I'll do something like question.setResponse, and I'll pass in true. Okay. So, oh, you know what? I can pass in the string true. So I'm going to pass in the string true, like somebody typed in the word true. So now when I call set response, it's going to come up here and create this response. So let's go ahead and see how that works, because I want to make sure that we understand how we're jumping around. Again, classes also affect the top to bottom execution. And so here we are inside here. I'm going to go ahead and create that question, or I've stepped inside here. I've got the text and the answer. I'll step, and now I have the question object created. So here's that question object. It's got answer and text. Now I'm going to step inside the set response. And when I call this method, it's just like before. This method, it's going to transfer control back up here to the first line of the set response method, because that's the method I'm calling. It's going to take the value string true and put that here in this parameter, and Python creates that self for us. So we don't have to worry about self. Python takes care of that for us. So I'll go ahead and just step right in. Boom. Now you can see we're inside here. And I remember, look, I passed in true here, and that's the value of response right now. That's that string. And if I look at self is that question object. It's that question object that we've created. And now it has a function variable, the set response function. It's got its own function variables in here. So when true, false question got created, this right here turned into a function, put that code inside set response, and then took that and put it inside the object. You can see it's inside the object now. This object owns this function, which is kind of cool. It's a function inside an object. And so now we've got response strip lower. If I just step over that, the response is still the same, but it's lowercase now, true. And so now it's going to do this comparison, and that's true. So it's going to do this, that if succeeded. And as soon as I run that line, we can see inside question, now there's an underscore response because that got set right there. And if I run this now, boom, 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 here's question.text, question.answer, and question.response got printed out as well. So you can see these data attributes don't get created until we actually set them. After I run this initializer, underscore response wasn't there yet. And so I have to call set response before I can use underscore response on my self variable, because that's where it's getting created. Okay, so now that we have that, the last thing is whether or not it's correct. So now I'll do def is correct, self, and there's no parameters here. There's no arguments that I'm going to be giving it. The only thing I have is self, because I'm going to be looking inside the object to determine whether or not the response is correct. And again, what is that? I'm going to return self.response like that is equal to self.answer, which is the value that we configured this with when it was created. So down here now, I can do something like this. Print the response was correct. And I can print out question.isCorrect like that. and it's a method. Sorry about that semicolon. It's a method. It's a function. It's a function here. So I have to do the parentheses. So the response was correct. Question is correct. So if I run this, boom, we can see here's the text. Here's what it should be. Here was my answer. And the response was correct as false. So now we can ask this question, are you correct? And if you are correct, then you get a score for it. And if you're not correct, you don't get a score for it. Okay, so that's true, false question. So that's how we use true, false question. Finally, what we want a way to be able to say, hey, I want to print out my question. I want to print out this question, and I want it to print out using the text that is stored inside it. The problem is if I just print the question like this, what it gives me is this weird object thing, right? This is that thing again. Main, true, false question, object at, and then this memory address. This is not what I wanted to show. I wanted to show a human readable string. And so to be able to do that, I create the method def underscore string like that. And I'm going to delete this crap here because I don't need it. And so what should it return? It should return whatever I want it to return. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it have true or false. And then I'm going to give it the self text, right? So the text from the question like that. So now if I run this, when it prints the question, it's going to call this string method, and it's going to show this. And you can see that right there. True or false? The sky is neon green. So you can see I'm getting to the point where I can actually I can print out the question, and then I would be able to ask for a response and then set the response. So let's try actually building all of that together. Let's see what happens here. So I'm going to print the question. I'm going to get a response. So the response is going to be like input your response like that. So that'll be the response. Then I can do question.setResponse and pass in the response. And then, then I'll do something like if question dot is correct like that, then I can print out you answered that correctly. Otherwise, print that is the wrong answer. Okay, so we've created this question object, we've printed it out, we've asked for a response, we've set the response based on whatever somebody gave us, and then we ask the question, is that correct? And that's going to come up here and ask that, and if it is, it's going to do that. So let's try running that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run it. It's going to say true or false, the sky is neon green. I'll say, I don't know, false, like that. And I answered that correctly because I took the word false that was set as the response. The response set that to false over here. And then when we said is correct, it said, is your response, which is false, equal to self.answer, which was the false that we passed in when we created it. So here's kind of like how we would interact with a true false question. Now we kind of want to do the same thing, but for a multiple choice question. So what was that like? So it looks a lot like the true false question. It has minimum data needed, the text, the correct answer, and then the list of choices, and then is correct and set response, because we need to know if it's correct and we need to be able to set the response. So how do we do this? How do we do this right here? How do we add a new thing? Well, so we'll create our class of multiple choice question like that. We'll create our initializer. Again, remember the initializer tells us what the minimum data is needed. So we're going to need the text of the question, the correct answer, and then the list of choices. But the first parameter is always self. So then it'll be text, then it'll be answer, and then it'll be choices. Okay, just like that. And so now we just set those as variables inside the object. So we'll do self._text is equal to text. We'll do self.answer like this is equal to answer. And then we'll do self.choices is equal to choices like that. So now we have text, answer, and choices. So what would be correct here? So let's see. So when we set the response, what we want to do is we want to set it to an answer. And so our answer options will be like A, B, C, and D. So we'll pop that in there, okay? So what we'll do is we'll do something like this. Def set response, self, and the response from the person. we'll go ahead and do the same thing again. Response is equal to response.strip.lower, like that. But what happens if they type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Let's just use the first letter. Okay, let's just use the first one. If the length of our response, if the length of our response is greater than 0, let's go ahead and set that. Okay, so self.response is going to be equal to response and that first character. Otherwise, we're going to set self.response equal to the empty string, because then it's always wrong. If they type in the empty string, if they just hit enter, F them. They answered it wrong. So the next thing we need is it correct? So is correct is our next thing. And again, remember, we just use self because we have the answer already stored in the object. We have the response already stored in the object, and it's going to be the same thing. Return self.response.self.answer. We did lower this here. So whatever this is here, whatever this answer is here, we probably want to do the same thing. So let's go ahead and lower that as well. And so it will store the lowercase version inside our answer here. And so our is correct here. So our return self.response equals self.answer. It's literally the same method here. Okay, now lastly, we've got to figure out how to print this thing out. Def string self, like that. So how do we print this out? Well, let's say we want to print out like the name, or we want to print out the text, and then we want to print out each of the lines inside the options with a letter involved. Okay, so we're gonna sort of like do some really cool stuff here. We're going to do we're going to build a string. Okay, so our string is going to first be self.text, and then we're going to put a new line on the end of it, and then we're going to return that string. Okay, but then we need to loop over and add our options on it. So what are the option labels? So our labels will be something like, A, B, C, and D. Let's just say it's only 4 options at most. So what we'll do is we'll loop over each item inside our choices, our self.choices. Remember, that's where it's stored. It's in self.choices. So for choice in self.choices, so that's going to give us each one. And now we can like add that. So we can say S plus equals, we're going to add it to our current string. We'll go ahead and put a tab character in there. And then what we'll do is we'll do like labels, but now we need to figure out which index we're on. So let's go ahead and start off with I equals 0. Okay, so labels index I plus period space plus choice, like that. Okay, so that's going to print out a tab, and then the label, which will be like, A, B, C, D. And I spelled this wrong here. Look at me, labels. And then a period, and then the choice. And that's going to loop over it and do everything there. So let's go ahead and test this out. So we have all of our methods here. We have the initializer, which sets up all of the data. We have the responses. We're going to set that response. We're going to lower it. We're going to just get the first letter from it. We're going to return whether or not it's correct. And this is going to print out our string. So let's try this out, okay? Oh, we also need a new line here. I almost didn't do a new line. For at the end of every option, we need a new line after that. So now that we have that, let's try instead of true false question here, let's do a different one. Let's do multiple choice question, like that. And the question is, what color is the sky? Like that. And we're going to say that it's the second one. It's going to be B. Okay, it's the B, whatever B is. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create some options here. So we'll say neon green. That's probably not right. We're going to do blue. That's great. We're going to do frog because, surrealists love frogs. And maybe, I don't know, meme. It's meme colored today. So now we're going to print that question. We're going to get the response, set it, and then we're going to test to see whether or not. You can see here, all of these lines are still exactly the same. And that's because both of these things, this multiple choice question, and you know what, I'm going to split my screen here. This multiple choice question here and this true false question, they have the exact same names of their methods. Set response is the same. It has the same number of parameters. Whoops. The same number of parameters. Is correct is the same. String is the same. So you can see I'm using the exact same names because they're the exact same thing. They do the exact same thing. So now that I've got this set up, let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. So it's going to print out what color is the sky. Oh, look, A. That's not good. So what am I not doing right up here? I'm not incrementing my I, right? So I've got to do I plus equals 1 so that it will keep getting bigger. So now if I run this again, now I should have A, B, C, D. So what color is the sky? I'll say B. Boom, I answered correctly. What happens if I play it again? My response is neon green. Oh, that is the wrong answer. So it's jumping around. It's doing all of this stuff for me. One of the things I want to show you is, you see how I made that mistake with this I equals 0 and this I plus equals 1? Python has a method or a function that you can pass a list into, and it will give you both the choice, that item in the list, as well as a number for that index. And that is the enumerate function. It's a great function to know and put in inside your arsenal of things. And so enumerate returns two values, I and choice. So it gives you the index that you're currently on and the value that's inside the list. So this makes it much easier. I won't get bugs because it's all plugged in there. So if I run this again, now you can see A, B, C, D, because that I is being given to me by the enumerate function. I love the enumerate function. It does some really cool stuff. So I'm going to say it's frog. It is not frog colored. You see? So now we have something that allows us to do multiple choice questions and true false questions. You see that right there? Multiple choice question and true false questions. So now I have both of those things set up. The last thing I need is a quiz object to tie all of this together. And that quiz object is going to use code like this right here. It's going to print the question, it's going to give me a response, and it's going to set the response. So it's going to do this kind of thing for me. So let's go ahead and build a quiz. So what did we need for the quiz here? So the minimum data needed. As I recall, there is no minimum data needed. All I need to do is create a quiz. But then I need to be able to add a question. And then I need to be able to do something like administer the quiz, which, prints out each of the questions and gets the answers. And then I need to be able to show the final score. I need to be able to get the total score of that. So what's that quiz look like? Or what's that class look like? So let's go ahead and just do it. Class quiz. When I don't have anything, when I don't need to pass in data for my initializer, because there's no minimum data needed here, I don't need an initializer. Okay, I don't need an initializer unless I need to set some values that I'm going to use. If I keep adding questions to this quiz, I'm going to need a list or something to add those to. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. I'm going to do def init self. I don't need any parameters, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say self questions is equal to a new list. And now I can have all of those questions inside a list. And I can just loop over the list, print out each question, and then get the answer, and then, do that thing. So next up, I need to be able to add a question. So add question like this, self, and then the question. Remember, self is always Python. So all I need is the question to come in. And what I'll do is self.questions. That's that variable right there. Initially, it's an empty list. So I just need to keep appending the questions to that list. Up like that. I need to append that question to that list of questions. Then to administer the quiz, do I need any data? No, I just need to run the questions. So now I'm going to do essentially what I did down here with these questions and set responses and things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over my questions. So for each question in self.questions like that, now I have that question, a question object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print the question. Then I'm going to get the response like this, input your response like that. Oops. And if I spelled it correctly, it would be happier. And then I do question.setResponse like that. And I pass in the response. Boom. So there's the response. So what have I done here? What have I done here with this? So I can come down here. I can create a new quiz. Okay. So I'm going to create a new quiz equals quiz. And I don't have any parameters for quiz. Remember, I'm gonna split my screen again. Up here in the quiz class, there are no parameters, so I don't give any parameters to it. Now I have this question, multiple choice question, and I want to add it to the quiz. So I can take this question here and I can do something like quiz.addQuestion, question, just like that. And I'm going to get rid of all of that. So that would allow me to add a question. It adds this multiple choice question. So now I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do question is equal to true false question. And I'll do the sky is neon green. And that's false, like that. And then I'll do quiz.addQuestion, like that. And I'll pass in that question. So what am I doing right? What's happened right now? So I've created a quiz question and added it. And I've created true false question and I've added. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do quiz.administer. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just run this and we'll see what happens here. So first, it prints out this first one, my response, whatever, meme colored, and the sky is neon green. That's true. It hasn't done anything in terms of scoring stuff, but I wonder what's going on with this. What a great question. Let's go ahead and put a breakpoint here and step into it, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and use my Python debugger, and I'm going to look at these objects as they're being created, as they're running, okay? So right now I've got this quiz. And if I look inside quiz has a questions and it is a list. You can see it says here it's a list. It's got that brackety thing on it. And so that implies that it's a list and it's got two things in it, a multiple choice question and a true false question. Those are those two questions. Whoops, where's my, look at that. Now all of a sudden like my thing went away. I want that to come back. There it is. So I created the quiz. I added this question that I created and that got put inside that list. And then I did that and added the question again and it appends it. Every time it just right here, it appends that question to that list of questions I started off with. So now when I call .administer and I step inside here, it comes up here to that administer. And if I look inside here, there are those questions and I'm just going to loop over them. So for question in self.question. So the first question is that multiple choice question here, which has what color is the sky in it. I'm going to print that out. Whoops. You see right there, it's now inside the multiple choice question. If I look inside the call stack, you can see I'm inside the string method here of the multiple choice question. So when I called print question, this is a multiple choice question. So it went to that string method for that multiple choice question object. So now it jumped down here, okay? And so once that's done, it prints out that question there, and now it's going to ask for that response. My response is meme colored, and now response contains that letter D, and I'm going to set it inside that question. That specific question, which is right here, it is the multiple choice question. So I'm setting the letter D inside this multiple choice question. The current question variable contains that multiple choice question. And so when I click if I want to go inside that, you can see I'm now inside the set response of multiple choice question, not true false question, because this object is a multiple choice question. And so I go ahead and I set that and I click that. And so now I'm going to loop again. And the next question right here is a true false question. You can see it's a different kind of object. It is a different object. It's this object that I created down here, this object, true false question, that I then added to that list. We're on the second element. This was the first one. This is the second one. So now I'm on that second element because I'm on the second loop here of my list of questions. So I can print that question and there it is, true or false. I'm going to get that input. I'm going to put false. And now it's going to set that response inside that question. So I'm going to step inside that and you'll see now I'm inside the set response of the true false question class, not the multiple choice, the true false question class, because this object that I'm currently in is an object of true false question type. So I come to this method itself. Even though it has the same name and the same parameters, it goes to the correct method because the method, remember, these functions here belong to the class. So when I call question.setResponse. It's going to find the set response for the class of the correct kind of object. That's what object-oriented programming is all about. And if I play it out, then it's done. That's what we expected. So now the last thing to do is to get the score. I want to be able to print out my score, okay? So I want to print out quiz.total score. Let's call it get total score, okay? Or just get score. I like get score, like that. So print.get score, okay? So now up here, I need to be able to, if I don't create this method, okay? Right now, if I look at the quiz object, I've only got add question and administer, and here's quiz.getScore, okay? If I try running this, I get that horrible, I have to go through the administer part first, so A, false, like that. Right here, when it calls quiz.getScore, I get that attribute error again, which says quiz has no attribute getScore, which means I haven't defined it. I need to be able to define it before I use it. So I know it's a method. So up here, I'm going to go ahead and do def get score, okay? Like that. Okay, so we have a total of, we have questions, and every time the question is correct, we want to, we want to increment the total. So our total starts off with 0, and then we add up, okay? So for each question, for each question in self.questions like that, if question.is correct, is correct, like that. So if it's correct, I forgot my self. You see that right there? I need that self. So if question is correct, then we want to increment total by 1, and then we'll return total, like that. So that's how we get the score. If I run this again now, and I get those same questions, what color is the sky? Let's go ahead, neon green. The sky is neon green, true. I got a total score of 0. So it would be nice to be able to like print that out right here, like that, right? So, let's go ahead and put that in. Your score is that. So that was a pretty bad test taking. I'll try it again here. Let's run that again. And now we're going to, what color is the sky? I'm going to say blue this time. And the sky is neon green, false. And now my score is 2. So again, how does this happen? When we administer this test and it comes in here, when we administer the test and it loops over each question, it prints the question that sets the response on there. So now we have a response on each question. We set that value inside the object. And so once we do that and we loop over this and we ask, is it correct? It's going to tell me. So let's actually do that. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here for this get score, okay? And I'm going to go Python debugger. So what color is the sky? Blue. Is the sky neon green? True, okay? So let's take a look at where we are. So we're looping over this self.questions, and the first question in there, remember, is a multiple choice question. You can see that right here. The question is the multiple choice question. And inside here, the correct answer was B. We did that when we created the object. We set the correct answer. And then the response was B, which was what I typed in over here. So when it calls is correct, I'm going to step inside that object. We are now inside the is correct method for the multiple choice question. And self.response is lowercase b. Self._answer is lowercase b. So this will return true. So when it returns true, then we increment the total by 1. And so our total is going to go up 1 right here. So now our total is 1. Now we're on the second loop of this question, and our question is now that true false question. So if we step inside this is correct, it's going to go to the is correct of the true false object. So let's step inside there, and you can see is correct inside true false question because this is a true false question object. And again, the response is true. The answer was, the answer was false. So is true equal to false? The answer is going to be false. So this will return false, and we don't get that. So it's going to go back up to this loop. We don't get an increment. So now we're done with that loop, and it's coming down here to the total, and the total is 1. And so that's going to print out your score is 1. We can even do stuff like, something like let's do something else. Def get num questions, like that, okay? Self, and what we'll return is the length of self.questions, like that. So that'll tell us how many questions are in there. And so now when we run it, we can also say your score is this out of, and I'm going to make this go away, out of quiz.getNumQuestions, like that. Okay, so now it's going to be like 1 out of 2 or 2 out of 2 or 0 out of 2 because we're returning the length of that list. So I'm going to go ahead and run that again. I'll go ahead and say D and true, and my score is 0 out of 2 because I was wrong on both of those. If I do it again and I'm like B and false, now my score is 2 out of 2. You see? So what we're doing, we're taking our code and we're moving it into a place. And that's really the important part, is I've created this true false question which contains its own data. It contains its own text and its own answer, and we put it on the self dot. That's how we shove it inside that object. And then we create functions on it that actually do things with it. And once we have those functions, which are called methods if they're on a class, we create an object of that thing. So we create a multiple choice question object like this, which calls our initializer. Whoops, up here. Let me go ahead and collapse this. Boop, like that. It calls the initializer on our multiple choice question right there. It calls that initializer and sets up all of the data inside of it. And then we add it to another object. And so now that's living inside the quiz. There's an object stored inside a list inside another object. That may sound really confusing, but think about this. If we had something like, names and ages like this, and we just did names and ages, which were a list of lists, like Noor is 29 and, Asa is 23, like that. We have a string inside of a list, inside of a list. So we've already dealt with this kind of stuff, shoving things inside other things. But now what we're doing is we're doing it with our own objects, and our own objects can have their own methods on them. And those methods hold the logic for each step of the way that we want to be able to do. So this administer thing here for question and self.questions, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, quiz, you own the questions. We're adding them to this list inside of you. Now that you own them, go ahead and loop over them, print them out, get the responses, and then set those responses. And then once you're done with that, then we can call get score, and we can end up getting this is correct, whether or not it's correct, and we'll increment total by 1. So our objects here, our objects are created by classes, and our classes are two things. They are data, like the quiz is a list of questions, and that's the data inside it. The multiple choice question, its data is the text that it displays, the answer that's correct, the choices that it displays, and then the response that the human types in that we set on it. So that's the data for a multiple choice question. And what's the behavior? We can print it out and make it pretty. We can ask it if it's correct. We can set the response on it. And that's the same thing that we can do down here with true false question. We can set the response on it. We can ask that question, was the answer correct? And then we can also print it out pretty. And using those functions, using these methods on these question objects inside here, that allows us to do things like for each question inside that list of questions, print the question and then set the response. And then when we want the score, we can say for each question in that list of questions, find out if it's correct. If it is, add 1 to the total, then return the total. And then we also return the number of questions too, by returning the length of that list. And so that's how we write classes. We look at what's needed. So we had this quiz here. Earlier we had, the multiple choice question thing, or let's do true false. So earlier we had the true false question thing. The required data for it was I needed to have the text of it, and I needed to know what the correct answer was. And so those are the things that become part of the initializer. And then what kind of behavior did I need? I needed to be able to set the response And I needed to be able to like ask it, is that response correct? Is it correct? Was the response correct? And so this becomes like the blueprint for that class. This becomes the required data becomes the parameters for the initializer. And then these become methods. This becomes a method. This becomes a method. And all of our methods start off with that self parameter. Self. Okay. Set response requires an argument. It requires an argument, which, it has a parameter, which is, the person's response. And is correct doesn't have any arguments. It doesn't have any parameters, because to check to see whether or not it was correct, we look at the correct answer that was stored and the response that we set here, and we compare those two things. All of that data lives inside the object. And so that's object-oriented programming. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. We'll take a look at this quiz thing here, and I'll make this file available to you inside of Canvas.